So I would like to welcome again everyone on behalf of Seed Business School. I'm András Kárpáti, and together with Eszter, we will be your host today. As you probably know, we have started this webinar series of 8 sessions in early May. This is already our 5th event. So besides today's session, we have 3 more to go until the end of June. Please check them on our website and reserve your place. As always, before we start, I would like to give you some technical information. Okay. As you have experienced, your microphones are now muted, but during the session, you are free to ask any questions via the chat icon at the bottom of the screen. And you can also let us know if you face any technical issues. We hope there won't be any, but just let us know as soon as you face them. Also, during the presentation, we will ask you to use the chat function for some interactive exercises. Following the presentation, there will be a moderated Q&A session where I will read your questions and Eszter will answer them directly. But we are also trying something new today. And besides asking your questions in writing, we will open the floor for asking them directly with your voice and camera on. So if you would like to ask a question that way, please click on raise hand under the participant list, and I will give you the word during the Q&A session. Please also note that your names or device names are visible to everyone. So if you want to change it, you may do so under the 3 dots next to your name. For seeing the slides better, you can minimize the participant window in the top right corner. At the end of the session, as usual, we would like to ask your quick opinion about how much did you enjoy the webinar. So make sure you stick around for a few seconds at the end. We plan to finish around 5 p.m., but depending on your questions and the discussion, we are happy to stay with you for another 10 or 15 minutes. And now I would like to briefly introduce our topic today. We live in stressful times, and it has never been more important to manage your energy, improve your own resilience to stress, and help your team members do the same. We will look at how to keep our inner balance under pressure, how we can avoid burnout, and how we can support our teams to cope with all the challenges the pandemic has brought. Today's webinar provides practical advice and best practices for leaders so that they may help themselves and their teams become more resilient. Our presenter is Eszter Avar, who is an organizational and leadership development professional. She holds degrees in psychology, mathematics, and economics. Over the last 10 plus years, Eszter has been working as an OD consultant, executive coach, and team coach for a broad spectrum of international companies. She is also the founder of the Best of HR project, which has facilitated the sharing of best practices between HR managers in Hungary since 2011. And she is also the head of learning and development at HR Partner. Most importantly, she's an active executive coach at Seed Business School since 2015. Eszter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And a very warm welcome to all of you. On one hand, I'd say I'm very happy that all of you are here. On the other hand, I very much hope that your interest is related to, I'm not so stressed, but it's always useful to find out about it some more. And not the, oh my God, I'm so stressed, please help me. As András mentioned, especially because this topic, stress, is a very personal topic, I would like to make it as interactive as it is possible, given the constraints of a webinar. So for example, I would like to welcome any of you. I can see that some of you already switched on the video, but if any of you would like to join us, making yourselves visible, you're very welcome. As you can imagine, giving any presentation is a stressful thing. Not saying it's a panicky thing, but certainly it involves a certain level of stress. And one thing about stress is that personal connection is one of the things that can release it. But anyway, we'll talk about it some more later. I would like to start with a personal story, which is about me and stress, me and energy. And the story starts 4 years ago when I had the opportunity to try a very interesting gadget, a biofeedback instrument. It's called Fusion Vita And what it does, it measures your heart rate variance and your breathing for a whole week. I just found it very interesting. I was curious more than worried. I thought, my life was fine at the time. I was busy, but happy, running up and down in town, doing my job. And I thought it would be interesting to get some feedback on how I'm doing with stress and energy. And the results really surprised me because I expected something maybe more positive. But the feedback was that my lifestyle in terms of energy management is just not sustainable. The feedback the consultant gave me was that I'm doing all right, but if I continue like this for several more years, I will be heading towards burnout and I can get some health issues. And it was a bit of a shock because I felt well. I mean, I was busy and tired at times, but really I was happy, as Sandy said earlier. The happiness was there. Anyway, that was the point in my life when I started focusing on stress management and the topic of stress more. And I started changing my lifestyle. That didn't mean I changed my jobs. I didn't change my job, my family, my position. It all stayed the same, but I started changing my lifestyle step by step. So here, a small fine-tuning act, there, something new. And 2 years later, I did this experiment again. I had to schedule it on for another week. And I was happy to find that my results were much better. And the reason I share this with you, because there, 2 years ago and 4 years ago, I had 3 major learning points. And I think this could be a starting point, a good starting point for this webinar. The first thing is that it appears that you can deplete your energy and head towards burnout without actually realizing it. I wasn't aware of this. I felt busy but happy. The second learning point is that it is possible to adopt a more sustainable lifestyle without having to quit your job, without having to change your life fundamentally. What I believe in, a very conscious step-by-step approach. And today I would like to share some of that with you. And the third learning point is that as a leader, I'm responsible for the amount of stress my team members experience in their life. And I see this every day. If I live a stressful period, naturally it involves them and it makes them more stressed. So I think taking care of myself, looking after myself in terms of stress management is not only for me, but also for my team members, everybody I'm responsible for. Having mentioned being responsible for, and also in this respect, I'm responsible for my family members too, because the more stressed I get, the more stressed they get. So this is my story, but I would like to also show you a bigger, broader perspective. Some data which I found shocking regarding stress. Just this one, for example, among the US working population, workplace is the single biggest source of stress. By the way, this data I'm going to show you, it's not from the last 2 months, 3 months. These are from years ago. So this topic of stress is definitely not new. Another thing, in Great Britain, 79% of the adult population experiences stress at the workplace. In Europe, 33% of the working population regards stress as the biggest health risk in their lives. And 37% of them are stressed, depressed, or anxious because of their work and say that the situation has got worse in the last 12 months. Again, this data is not new. This is not 2020. It seems that stress and lacking energy is a global epidemic. And on top of that, there comes the coronavirus, which makes things fundamentally worse. Now, earlier, some of you were here a bit early. We had a little discussion with Sandy about what kind of data is available. What I find is that new data is coming out every day. I brought you one specific little research to indicate the situation. This is US data. 68% of workers claim that the coronavirus pandemic is the most stressful time of their professional career, even more than major events like 9/11 and the 2008 recession. So what have we got here? We've got a global issue, a global problem with stress. And then on the top of that coronavirus and the insecurity of it all. Those of you who were here last time, Balázs talked a lot about it, like the emotional effects of the pandemic. Anyway, it's all increased. And I think this is why this topic of stress and energy has become so important. In this presentation, I would like to focus on techniques and best practice that are not coronavirus specific. These are techniques that you can do anytime when life and work is stressful. However, I think these last 2 months make it doubly important, because when we look around, we find that a lot of our colleagues experience very high levels of stress, very low levels of energy. This is what I see around me. So 2 topics for today. First, how can you be more energized and less stressed? And secondly, how can you help your team to do the same? How can you help them? Because as a leader, it's your responsibility. And before we start the topic of how can you be more energized and less stressed, so start focusing on the personal aspect of it, I would like to do a little poll with you. And the question which I'm inviting you to answer is, how would you rate your own stress level in the past 2 months? What is the stress level you're experiencing? And I can see data's coming in now. And we're waiting maybe 10 more seconds so that everybody can cast their votes. Okay, I think we are done, so we can end the polling. And here we are. And I think the most important finding here is that we experience very different levels of stress. Some of you low or relatively low, moderate, that's our winner, but there are quite a number of people among you here today who do experience relatively high, or extremely high levels of stress. So let's talk about what we can do to help ourselves. What can we do to, I wouldn't like to use the word beat stress, and I'll come to that, but to make our lives easier in terms of stress management and energy management. And to talk about that and to share techniques, the first thing is to understand what stress really is. In the biological, physiological sense, stress is a very useful and adaptive reaction behavior. In the wildlife, with every creature, what happens when the stress reaction kicks in? When does it kick in? When there is some sort of danger or some sort of attack. That's the most common occurrence of stress. And the so-called fight or flight reaction kicks in. What does it mean in terms of physiology? 2 hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, get flooded in the system. Heartbeat goes up, blood pressure goes up, and all this is designed to pump as much oxygen to the muscles as possible, so that you've got a chance to survive the situation. Anything else, such as growth, tissue repair, reproduction, they shut down. It's not important. At that moment of stress reaction, the only important thing is to survive, like for this zebra. And without the stress reaction, we wouldn't survive these dangerous situations. So this is from the evolutionary sense, this is the meaning of stress. However, there is a big difference between animals and humans. Because while this zebra will walk around, if it survives, will walk around the field happily grazing tomorrow, not worrying about yesterday's lion's attack. Humans can't seem to be can't seem to be able to switch off. And this is the problem with stress. It's not the fact that it is there in our lives. In fact, it's a very good thing. Some even say it's the spice of life. If you weren't stressed ever at all, it would be quite boring. But the fact that we can't switch off is an issue. So the goal is, and my point today will be, to find a good balance between stressful times, which are natural, even useful, and non-stressful times. This is the important thing. Another big difference between this zebra here and the human being is that while the zebra experiences the stress, the physiology of stress, while running, while being in movement very, very actively, humans experience the same often while they are sitting down in front of the computer. You sit there, you get an email, it stresses you out, and you don't move. And that's what makes it very unhealthy, or at least this is one aspect that makes it very unhealthy. So the first message, the first piece of advice is move. The more stressed you are, the more stressful your days are, the more you should be moving. And here today, I'm not talking about the usual message of you should do some exercise and you should go out for a run at least 3 times a week or 4 times a week, or I'm not sure what the official advice is. No, my point today is to make sure you build in some small movements during the day. Those of you who are already not in home office, make sure you take the stairs after your lunch break. Make sure that when you stand up and go to the toilet, you go to the toilet which is not the closest to you, but on the next floor. So some small things. Those of you who sit in the home office, the temptation of sitting in front of the screen all day and hardly moving at all is very big. Find some time when you take breaks and you actually move around. Now we are not quarantined. I think in all countries, they are attending from different countries, you can walk around. Just go out and walk around the block and come back. Take this seriously, because this is the way to flush out adrenaline and cortisol from your system. So that's the first piece of advice. Second piece of advice, breathe. Breathing is possibly the easiest, more easily accessible way to change your physiology considerably in a very short time. There are some breathing techniques. I think there might be some of you who even meditate, which usually has a lot to do with breathing exercises too. And what slow, steady breathing does to you, that it changes hormonal levels and it changes your heart rate too. And I would like to recommend one specific breathing exercise today, and that's the Navy SEAL breathing technique. The reason I'm recommending it is because it's very easy, it's very simple, and because this, of all breathing techniques, this is the one that is actually the official recommended technique for the Navy SEAL soldiers who have to be really calm and focus during times of combat. And this is how it goes. It also goes by the name of 4x4 technique. And this is the point where I would like to stop sharing so I can actually show it to you. So 4x4 technique. You count to 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, while you breathe in. Then again, 1, 2, 3, 4. You keep the air in your lungs. Then again, 1, 2, 3, 4. You breathe out. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep the air out of your lungs. It's as simple as that. And they've measured it, of course, many times. They find that even after 10 cycles like this, your heartbeat is already affected in a positive way. The reason I switched off sharing, because I would like to do it together with you. And I'm hoping most of you are not even on camera, so you can do it secretly in your room. Nobody will see you. But there is a huge difference between listening to me and maybe believing that, yeah, it's a good technique, maybe I'll try it sometime, and actually trying it here and now. So I'm inviting you to do it with me just once, just one cycle, and see what it feels like. Then you can decide whether you're going to make a regular practice out of it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, breathing in. 1, 2, 3, 4, keeping it in. 1, 2, 3, 4, breathing out. 1, 2, 3, 4, keeping it out of your lungs. And this is the technique. Very simple and yet very effective. And I'd like to invite you to a challenge. Why does this breathing technique work? Because it slows down your breathing, which is exactly the opposite of the stress breathing, which is a bit like that. So the challenge is the following. You'll be listening to this presentation for another 15, 20 minutes maybe. Why don't you try to listen to it, not with the Navy SEAL, because I think that would require too much concentration, and our next topic is multitasking anyway, and the bad aspects of it, but just try to listen to it with deep breathing, slow breathing, deeper and slower than usual. That's all. And maybe at the end, we can check whether you manage to keep it up or not. Just make sure that it's slower than your usual breathing and see what it does to you. Putting back the sharing, I'd like to introduce another technique. Can you see my sharing again? András, please nod, thank you.
Yes.
So, multitasking. I find, but it's not only me, psychologists, researchers find that one of the huge sources of stress in our life is multitasking. Too much information is coming our way. We have to switch from one task to the next, one piece of information to the next, and it's so hard. This switching really drains our energy during the day. And I'm sure many of you will feel the effect of being tired, lacking energy because of all these things being there. Of course, I'm not saying you should stop multitasking, but what I'm recommending is to reduce multitasking. There are lots of ways to do that. Here are two which I recommend today. First of all, you won't be able to avoid it altogether, but at least you can reduce it by having at least one so-called quiet hour during your day, when you switch off your phone, close the door behind you. Hopefully in your home office, there is a door that you can close. Tell your husband, wife, partner to look after the kids for that 1 hour, which is what we do with my husband. And have one quiet hour at least when you focus on just that one task in front of you. Those of you who've been to time management trainings, you will have heard about this technique, and it's recommended as a good tool for increasing work efficiency. Here today, I'm advocating it because of the stress impacts. It really helps to lower your stress levels. And the other thing, which is my personal favorite because it really changed my life a lot, is stopping notifications. And here's a question for you. And I would appreciate if many of you could answer this question in the chat. You're listening to this presentation now. If you got an email, would you find out about it here and now? Would there be a pop-up window? Would there be maybe a beep on your phone? Or you wouldn't have a clue because now you're here at the webinar, not multitasking, but listening to what I've got to say. So,
please set us your, yes, sorry.
What is it? Just in the chat quickly, if some of you could tell, is the notification on or is it off? Or you're multitasking so much that you're not even hearing this question, which in itself is interesting. Anyway, later you'll have time to put it in, because András, I can see that there are no answers in the chat yet. At least I can't see any.
There are a lot of answers.
There are a lot of answers. That in this case, please help me, and I'm going to ask for your help because for some reason my chat box is completely frozen. What is it? Is it lots of people seeing their notifications, or lots of people having switched off their notifications?
Actually, most people are saying no, they wouldn't have a clue.
Okay.
It's
This
off.
is brilliant news.
Some still say yes, it's on.
Okay.
But so yeah, it's quite diverse. But most I see more than 50% is off.
I'm really fair. I mean, I'm a little bit stressed because something's frozen in my chat box, so I can't see, but quickly changing to this other solution of András helping me. However, I'm really happy that many of you don't keep your notifications on. And those of you who haven't done this yet, I prepared my phone with, turn it off here too. Make sure that you only find out about a new email when you actually decide to check it. It really makes a big difference. Going on the next topic, feeling in control. And I think this is even more closely related to our present pandemic situation, because this is what it does to us. It takes away our sense of control. It takes away our sense of stability. We don't know whether our summer plans are going to happen the way we planned them or not. We don't know whether our workplace situation will change or not. So lots of things are uncertain. It's the feeling of not being in control. And that itself, that feeling, is very stressful. Therefore, I would like to recommend techniques which could give you back the feeling of control. And again, lots of techniques could be recommended here, but I would like to suggest one area, which is controlling your tasks. And tell me if this situation is familiar for you. You're sitting at home in the evening, maybe having supper with your family, and then you realize that, oh God, I forgot to send that email. And then, oh, I still have got to prepare for that big presentation tomorrow. At which point your wife comes to you saying that, don't forget, you still have to pick up the dry cleaning. Have you done that yet? And then you realize that, oh, there was still that phone call. I promised to call my colleague back, but I didn't do that. And it just comes and you just can't get it together. It's the lack of feeling control over your tasks. And if you feel it's familiar, just please put it in the chat box, because for me, this is definitely something that used to happen a lot and still happens from time to time. And to avoid this lack of feeling control, at least in your tasks, when life around us is so unstable anyway, I'd like to suggest two techniques. One is the Mind Sweep technique, and the other is the top 3 tasks for the day. Mind Sweep technique is the following. You sit down in front of an empty sheet or an empty Excel sheet. It takes about 30 minutes, 1 hour, depending on who's doing it. Make sure you do it in your quiet hour. And all you do is to put down all the tasks that you've been juggling in your head for the last days. Also, all the things from your existing task list can go on, but make sure you put everything down. The dry cleaning, your partner's birthday present, calling your mom, whatever you keep trying to remember. Because basically what you're doing, what these tasks are doing to you, if you don't put them down, is that they use the processor and you can't switch off. Remember what I said about the zebra contra humans? We can't switch off. So if you put it down, if you make sure that all of this is put down in an Excel, well, personally I use an Excel sheet, some people prefer a notebook. If you manage to put it down somewhere where you can access it later, it could give you peace of mind. Personally, in my Excel sheet, in my task list, I've got 121 items today. I checked before this presentation. These are not all work-related ones. These are anything, small things, big things, low priority, top priority. Some are not even due for another month. The main thing, though, is that they are all down in that Excel sheet. So I've got that feeling of control that I won't forget about them. Some of you will have even more sophisticated task lists than this, I'm sure. But those of you who find yourself juggling with trying to remember things, other private methods or workplace methods, use this. And the other one I would recommend is top 3 tasks for the day. Every day, many people face the same situation. You've got the task list, you've got to do like 20 things. You start doing them, you do your best, and you end up having done, I don't know, 12, and you've got 3 new ones. So what is it? It's a failure situation. Psychologically, you lose every day as long as you have a task list longer than your day. If you decide which 3 tasks are the one that you will definitely do that day, and maybe that you add it up, it's still not more than an hour, and you definitely do them, you decide to do them, and you complete them, psychologically, you create a winning situation. I decided it, and I did it. I'm in control. And that does a lot of good for our stress levels. Before we move on to how you can help your team, a quick summary. What can you do for yourself to lower your stress levels? Move, create small incidents of movement in a day. Breathe, the Navy SEAL technique. At which point I'd like to ask you, are you still doing the deeper breathing? Or have you maybe forgotten about it? You can start it again and experiment with it. Or you can, it's also feel free to say that, okay, I'm not investing in the breathing anymore. Anyway, this is just a small reminder. Reduce multitasking, quiet hour, notifications off, and feeling in control. These are the techniques I chose for the individual level and beating stress at the individual level. And I would like to go on with how can you help your team to feel more energized. First things first, be a role model. If you are busy, work at night, stressed all the time, feeling that your stomach is shaking with anxiety nonstop, you're not going to be a good role model. This stress will naturally be put on your team members. So make sure that you look after yourself so that you can look after your team. Second thing, going back to the topic of control and going back to the topic of coronavirus, because these months and possibly much more than months in the end are about losing control, not feeling the stability, your job is to make sure that you lower their levels of stress by providing some stability in times when things are so unstable anyway. Transparent communication is one way of doing that. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because last time at the last webinar, Balázs said so much about it already. All I would like to say from the personal point of view, that in the last weeks, I've found that I've sent many more emails to my team telling them what's been going on, what we are working on with the management team than previously. The more information I share, the more feeling of control I can give them. Another thing to help the feeling of control in your team is focusing on the next small step and celebrate them. Maybe a week ago, I had a coaching session with a top manager of a bank in Hungary. And he put it very simply. He said, Eszter, all the KPIs are out of the window. We don't have KPIs anymore, or the long-term goals. Well, who knows what will happen. And this is how we live. This is how we're forced to live our lives, and it's stressful. It really sucks the energy out of us. So help your team to focus on the next small step. In our team's case, for example, this is the designing of the online training portfolio. We would have done it anyway, irrespective of the coronavirus, perhaps. Maybe the big difference is that now we celebrate this achievement much more than otherwise, because often it is very difficult to feel of this deciding and then completing. And when you've got this positive loop of deciding and completing, that helps to have more energy and less stress in your lives. And one last group of topic with regards to helping your team to feel more healthy and less stressed is sustainable daily routine. You might remember, because I keep repeating it, so you can't not remember, that the problem is not stress. The problem is that we can't switch off. So a good day would be normal amount of stress or even high amount of stress for a period of time, maybe an hour or two, and then switching off. Then some stress again, then switching off. Then some stress again, and so on. This would be ideal. And when you create a daily routine, this is what you should be aiming at. And therefore, one practical technique, 45-minute meetings. Please consider introducing them. Most meetings in our calendar are 60-minute ones. And what I find is that most things you do discuss in 60 minutes, they can be discussed in 45-minute meetings. The consequence of 60-minute meetings is that you start at 9 o'clock, then you've got a 10 o'clock meeting, an 11 o'clock meeting, a 12 o'clock meeting, and then hopefully a lunch break, at least at 1 o'clock. If you have 45-minute meetings, because the next meeting will probably start at o'clock, you will have, everybody in your team will have another 15 minutes to recover, to move, to breathe, or even to make a quick phone call. And the daily routine will be much more sustainable. And I would like to invite you for another little experiment. Those of you who can join me, please join me. If you can now, open your calendar and check your meeting schedule for next week and see what it looks like. There will be meetings which you organized probably. And see if there are any meetings which you can make shorter. If it's a 60-minute one, could it be done in 45 minutes? If it's a 90-minute one, could it be done in an hour and a quarter? And of course, I can't see the chat box, but András will help me here. If you've got some findings, please share. Is there anything that you could change to make your team schedule a bit lighter? And if so, then try it and change it. Okay? So any comments on that will be welcome later too. But yeah, please make sure you experiment with it. Are there any comments, András?
Not yet. Well,
Not
we
yet.
have 30 minutes. There's someone, Peter's telling that they have 30 minutes default team meetings. Mm-hmm. So they are actually made that step already.
Well, this is a question because maybe, and I can see that Tamás has got a question, and Tamás, either you put it in the chat box or you can actually ask in person later. Soon we'll be finished.
Yes. Sorry to interrupt. Let's do this, Tamás. If it's okay with you, during the Q&A session, I will give you the word, okay? And you can ask your questions in person.
But as for the comment of half-hour meetings, brilliant. But does the next half-hour meeting start straight after? Because if that's the case, you haven't really gained anything in terms of stress management. The point of the 45-minute meeting, or it can be a 30-minute meeting, is that you've got a break afterwards. So make sure you experiment with that. And another last thing about sustainable routine, which is a topic I think makes a huge difference when it comes to levels of stress and energy, is evening emails. Because as a boss, as a manager, if you start emailing at night, if you email during the weekend, your whole team will get sucked into this. And let me be very honest with you. In fact, one of my team members is actually sitting here. I do send evening emails, and I'm not proud of it. But this is the new development. I've started consciously decreasing the number of evening emails I send. Because even if your team members don't answer to that, they still probably see it and start thinking about it already. And again, that brings us to the topic of not being able to switch off. So let them switch off. If you're a night owl and you have to write emails at night, not recommended, but okay, this is your decision. but don't bring the others or other team members into it by sending emails. One technique I learned from the Deputy CEO of Magyar Telekom: if you have to write emails in the evening or at the weekend, make sure you keep them in your outbox and send them out only when the working day kicks in. This way you can combine your special lifestyle perhaps with the respect for your colleagues' time and resting time and recharging time. And one last recommendation, which is I think a more general idea about stress management and energy management in your team: have regular one-on-one meetings. Again, here's a question to you. If you would like, answer in the chat, but at least think about it. If you list all your team members, when was the last time you had one-on-one sessions when you actually talked deeply about how they are feeling, how this period is for them? And if you find that maybe with someone you haven't had one for a month, 2 months, make sure you change that. Because here we talked about general approaches, how you can help your team. But of course, the best way you can help each individual is an individual targeted approach. But how could you possibly do that if you don't have one-on-one meetings to find out what's bothering them, what kind of stress they are experiencing? So put this extra focus on one-on-one meetings during these stressful times. And let me finish this presentation with a summary. These are all the techniques you have heard about today. How to keep yourself more energized and how to keep your team more energized. These were our 2 topics. And here are some techniques listed that I've recommended for you to try, to experiment with. And if you like them, then you can put them in your regular routine. And my question to you, and András, again, please help me with what you see, is please put down in the chat, what is the 1 or 2 technique that you're actually going to try? What is it that you will give a chance? What is it that you experiment with?
Okay, 45 minutes meeting is hitting in. Already 3 people introduced that. The Navy SEAL breathing.
Okay.
Notifications off. Top 3 tasks. Quiet hour breathing. Move and breathe. Navy SEAL. No emails in the evening. 45 minutes meetings.
Okay.
And
so
yeah.
A big variety, which also shows to me how different we are, how different things we need in order to beat stress. And it's good that there is a big selection of available techniques. Not only these, there is many more. So if you're interested in this topic of managing your own stress and managing your team stress, then I suggest to read and listen and learn much more about it. And step by step, you can keep your life and yet you can make it much more stress-free. Thank you very much for listening. And also, thank you very much for being so active during this presentation.
Yes. Esther, can you go to the next slide, please? And yes, now we open the floor for Q&A. And before I give Tamás the word, Tamás Pap, for asking his question, Yuri already commented previously during your presentation that they have 30 minutes meetings, but he reduced it by another 10. So they're looking for really effective and quick meetings. And Peter mentioned that there's actually you can set the sending time in Outlook. I know this function that you send an email in Sunday and you can set it for next 7:30 a.m. I experienced some problems with it. Some emails don't go out, but maybe I'm doing something wrong, but maybe 20-30% of the time it doesn't really work. But thank you for these comments. And now Tamás disappeared. Tamás, are you here? Tamás Pap? No, he's not. Yes, he's here.
I'm here. It was a mistake.
Yes.
I was managing the kids. I was multitasking.
Yeah.
and that's how I raised my hand.
Yeah.
I have no questions.
And
Oh, you
as
have
a
no
reward, you get all this attention, Tomasz.
Okay.
I was trying to find the top 3 priorities, and the 3 kids came on top.
Okay.
Okay. Then if any of you have any questions, either in writing, you just send us a chat in chat, or if you would like to ask in person, please, I'm trying to now switch off Tomasz.
And I can see Attila's got a question here in the chat, because now that I'm not sharing my screen, I can also see the chat box.
Okay, I cannot see the chat now.
Mm-hmm. Let me read it out, okay?
Okay, good.
So Attila is asking, is it a good technique if you break the working day, do some hour physical activity and continue with some tasks?
Okay.
I'm all for it. I think that if you break your day with anything which is not work, it's excellent. If you break your day and you move, that's possibly even better, because then it physically helps you get rid of the stress hormones.
Okay, yes, and I can now see the chat.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a question from Robert Petter.
Mm-hmm.
In this remote arena, or this remote timing, I'd rather keep the 1 hour to give my team time for chat too. Is that a bad practice?
I don't think so, but make sure you've got, I think the point of the 45-minute meeting is not the 45 minutes themselves, but the break in between meetings. A personal experience, a few years ago, I had coaching sessions. Basically, I had 1 hour, then the next one started, then another hour, then the next one started. That was not sustainable. I really couldn't perform well, and I felt really stressed afterwards. Then I introduced the 15-minute break. And the big change happened when I introduced the half-hour break between coaching sessions. That's when I feel that, okay, now this is working for me. I can really relax in between, as well as do some little work too. So be happy with the 1 hour meetings, but have a break in between for yourself and for your team.
Okay, there's a good question from Domokos Takács. When you're saying one-on-one meetings and you have maybe 2 layers below yourself, is it just your direct reports or direct associates, or you are suggesting or recommending to have one-on-one meetings with the whole team? Depends on the
question. I like the question. It makes me think, because on one hand, if you start having one-on-one meetings with your direct reports, they might feel the extra care. The question is, what will your direct report think about?
Yes.
It can easily be regarded as stepping over. So that you should be careful about that. But secondly, that's a lot of people. Do you really have time for that? Or are you going to increase your own levels of stress? So instinctively, my approach would be, of course, I don't know your team that well, but my instinctive reaction is that maybe you should make sure that your direct reports have one-on-one meetings with their team members. And what you can do is you ask them about it. Have you actually had your one-on-ones? Have you had your one-on-ones with everybody? So you can supervise it instead of doing it personally.
Okay, it's not a question from Silva, it's rather a comment. It is nice to have 30-minute meetings, but how do you do it? So I think actually that's it's an attitude basically on how you organize the meetings. It's doable, but it's not easy. I can say that.
I think you can do through a 30-minute meeting if you're crystal clear about what is the goal, what is the focus, and you only focus on that. And you have a separate meeting, like who was it? Was it Attila? I can't remember who mentioned it. Is that you would rather like to spend some time to allow for chatting? Maybe that can be a different meeting. Maybe you can separate. One could be more of a team building session, and the other one can be a very focused exercise to solve the task together. In this second case, I think 30 minutes is realistic.
Okay, there a question came to me actually privately, but is there a technique or a course for saying no to our bosses in a nice way?
Is there technique?
There's a technique or a course.
Okay,
I have
well,
my answer to that, but you go first.
I don't think there is a technique like this is what you should do. Oh, thank you, Esther. You've helped me. You've changed my life. I don't think there is such a technique. But actually brings me to a thought that today here I mostly talked about techniques which are so-called helping the emotional aspects of coping. But of course, in your stress management, it's important to face the issues that stress you out. Like if you've got an issue with your boss, yes, you've got to find ways to talk about it, to discuss it. If you've got an issue with your partner, same thing is recommended. This is one key element of stress management. The reason I was focusing on other techniques and not saying no, conflict resolution, etc., because we live in a time when there is so much we can't control. I can't control the fact that I'm solving my daughter's maths homework and having a meeting almost at the same time. This I can't change. So this is when breathing, breaks, etc., come into play, because there are certain things you just can't control. And I haven't answered your question, I'm aware of it. It just probably it would be worth another webinar, how to manage your boss and communicate with your boss. Non-violent communication, as somebody mentions.
Yes, yes. And Attila is telling you that it's a department he was referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
May I have a short question here, please?
Yes.
Hi, Yuri.
Hi, Esther. Well, first of all, I would like to use the opportunity to thank you for the seminar and the whole seat. Second, to mention that I had a great opportunity not only to see how you work, but also had a short run with you. And we talked about a lot of moments which run is a movement. You also mentioned that you try to record the ideas or reminders which come to your mind. And practical advice, I still run after I started last summer. When you run and something pops up, how do you record it somewhere so you don't forget about it and you don't stop running? I mean, do you understand the question?
I think I do. Well,
yes, please.
While running, I mean, I have to tell you that sometimes I go running, I think of something and I do stop because I find it important. I'd rather remember it and stop my run and restart again than worrying about it later. But that actually is a very important thing that you say, is that you've got one list of all your to-dos. But then you might be walking on the street and seeing something and this reminds you that, oh, I still have to go to the dry cleaners. Send yourself an email. This is what I do all the time, because your phone is usually with you. Send yourself an email, and later when you read your emails, which is not all the time, but only when you decide, then you can put it in your task list. This has really worked for me in the last years. So this is what I would recommend. But you might have to sacrifice some of the running for this.
You probably should stop and do picture and write it down. Anyway, thank you very much. Very energetic. Really enjoyed it. Very practical, useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was good to see you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, Esther, I might have a question for you. What do you do in a team where, you know, some members are extremely stressed and some and overloaded, while others have little to do? Or you have this Pareto thing, you know, 20% of the people doing 80% of the job. How do you manage this kind of diversity in terms of stress management?
Okay, I think two answers to that question. First of all, this is why I recommend one-on-one meetings, because if you just do a one-size-fits-all technique, it will work for some, it won't work for others. You have to really target your solution. But, and as an answer to this question, I'd like to share, I think, best practice. I really like this. At the start of the quarantine, in this team, it was actually a language school, and this is from the manager of a language school. some people found themselves completely overwhelmed with lots of work, where some people had nothing to do. And you can imagine it created a lot of tension right at the start. And this manager's first communication was just to put it out in the open and make sure that it is out, it is not a taboo, we talk about it. And she said in her email that we realize that some people really work a lot now, some people can't work because they've got parental duties, and some people have lost some of their tasks. But don't worry, because because we are thinking in the long term, and in the long term we'll make sure that this will even out. And I think there are two messages here. First of all, we know about it, please be tolerant, and also that in the long run we will make sure that it balances back out. And I think even just this communication helps in the emotional level, and therefore can release some stress the team might experience.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can you put back the slides, please? Because I have some last things to say.
Yeah, but then you will have to help me because Tamás has got a question here, but then I won't be able to see it.
Okay, okay, sorry, yes, Tamás. Okay, let me read Tamás's question. I had very high stress level recently and experienced to wake up during the night and things, tasks, worries started to jungle in my mind. Do you have a proposal how to handle this?
Mind sweep, Tamás. This is what, the reason I'm recommending is because this is what worked for me. Ever since I do regular mind sweep, I sleep better. I'm not saying it works for everybody, but it's definitely worth trying because it just helps so many people. As long as you keep thinking about your task, no wonder you have issues sleeping. Actually, somebody I know has sometimes gets up and puts it on a piece of paper, and then she can go back to sleep because now she knows that it won't get forgotten. I'm not sure which one works for you, but mind sweep. That's my answer. Okay, and I'll put back, András, the screen.
And while you're doing that, Eszter, thank you very much. Let me put up the poll for you regarding how did you feel today. Okay, so I'm launching the poll now, and on a scale of 1 to 7, please select a number about how did you feel today. Please vote if you haven't voted yet. Okay, thank you very much. And Eszter, would you mind moving to the last slide, please? Because I have just one last thing to say. Is that, of course, thank you for your participation. And remember to come back next Thursday. We will have Robert Huszár, also faculty member at SEED, and he will talk about ownership mentality. So see you next Thursday at 4 p.m. And until then, have a great weekend. And of course, as usual, if you have any further questions to Eszter or to anybody actually in the previous webinars, we will send out an email following this session with our email address where you can send your questions directly. Also, the slides for this webinar and the video, the recording, will be available on our website from early next week. So thank you again. Have a great weekend. It's great weather. Go and do some sports and enjoy. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.